Soup for President, Chapter 9. I'll carry the top, said Soup. Okay, I said. I'll carry the bottom. The sun was just coming up that Saturday morning when Soup and I sneaked into his Uncle Charlie's barn. Inside it was still night, but as soon as our eyes adjusted to the darkness, we found what we went for. As we fetched the ladder quietly out of the barn, I noticed why Soup always liked to tote the top of the apple ladder. Up there, the rungs were shorter and lighter. Good old Soup. Let's take a shortcut, whispered Soup. Across the brook? Yeah, and then up over the ridge. I figured we can get this ladder to Mr. McGrinley's barn in 10 minutes, providing. Providing what? We cut across Tinker's pasture. No, I stopped walking. Mama said I was never to cut cross lots through Mrs. Tinker's meadow. Not in the dead of night or the dead of winter, not ever. I'm not afraid, said Soup. You will be if you see him. We probably won't. How do you know for sure? I asked Soup. Just a hunch. Well, if you want my opinion of this whole business, I told Soup, best we don't cut cross lots anywhere near the Tinker place. Lugging the ladder, we crossed the brook. Soup first. He kept his sneakers dry by stepping really careful on the stones. Both my feet got soaked. Then uphill, Soup at the top of the ladder while I brought up the bottom. Once over the ridge, we can see Mr. McGrinley's barn, just the yonder side of Mrs. Tinker's property. Hurry, said Soup. We ran. Our Soups made dark green footprints on the silver that frosted the short meadow grass. The ladder didn't seem heavy at first, but now that my arms were growing a bit weary, it seemed to weigh a ton. To make matters worse, my hands were starting to sweat like they always did when I did something that Mama or Aunt Carrie told me I wasn't ever to do, like crop Mrs. Tinker's pasture. We saw him, and he saw us. Run! Yelled Soup. Batinsky was one heck of a big billy goat, bigger than a horse. Well, maybe not quite as big as a workhorse, but doggone near as big as a pony, and 10 times as mean. People said that old Mrs. Tinker, who was a widow, kept old Batinsky on a run loose on account of she didn't cotton to kids running cross lots through her property. Faster, hollered Soup. Is he coming? I was panting so hard that I could barely fire out the question. He ain't exactly retreating. He sure wasn't. Looking over my shoulder, I saw Batinsky headed our way at a full trot, and he wasn't carrying a ladder. That was when I passed Soup. I was still carrying the heavy end, but I pulled up even, and then raced by Soup like he was parked. Wait, puffed Soup. Wait, I'm not waiting for that billy goat. I heard tell he eats your clothes. Not even a starving moth would eat yours, panted Soup, more out of breath than I was. Batinsky was gaining, and I was sure bent on his not catching up with my end of the ladder. Or my end. When I heard old Batinsky let out a snort, which sounded more like a snarl, I figured we were in for it. Ahead lay the far fence in safety, a good 100 yards away, yet it was no use. Soup and I were tired, and Batinsky was fresh, and his 4 legs were quicker than our 4. Run! Cried Soup. Soup and I ran neck and neck, exactly 1 ladder apart. Between us and the fence was a tall and lonely elm. We would have to pass it en route to our escape. We passed it, or rather to say, we almost passed it, as Soup ran on one side of the elm and I chose the other. When you're carrying a ladder chased by a mean billy goat, a mistake like this can amount to one bad blunder. Whack! The middle of the ladder hit the tree, bent, and threw us both backwards as if we'd run into a pair of diving boards. Suddenly, there we were, running backwards. Not really running. Stumbling would be more like it. And here came Batinsky just as Soup and I lost control of the ladder and fell. If you look right close at a ladder, other than the legs and the rungs, what you'll see is some squares of air. But what Soup and I saw was Batinsky's head and horns stuck through one of the holes, halfway between Soup and me. It could have been the first time that Batinsky ever wore a ladder around his neck, and from the way his hooves were pawing the ground, he wasn't very happy. We got him, Soup yelled. I was trying to get up on my feet and not let go of my end of the ladder, while Soup was busy clinging to his end. That ladder, meanwhile, seemed to be holding on to that old billy goat. What'll we do? I hollered. I'm thinking, Soup hollered back. So is Batinsky, I said, and I think what he thinks is he doesn't like this very much. We've got him now. Yeah, and he's got us. All we do now, Soup pointed across the meadow, is ease our way to the fence. How? Best way we possibly can. Batinsky twitched his head from side to side with a mean expression on his face, his horns rattling along the wood that was holding him prisoner. My stomach felt sort of sloshy. Soup? Now what? I gotta go to the bathroom. At a time like this? Right now. Can you hold the ladder? Who will hold the other end? Soup asked. The goat. He'll get loose. No, he won't, I said. Hurry, said Soup. I hurried, my fingers fumbling with the buttons on my trousers, while Soup was gripping the ladder so hard his knuckles were turning white. That goat is getting ornery, said Soup. Soup was right. Batinsky was twitching and butting something fearful. One of its horns came loose. I was so excited that my fingers ripped off a button. I saw it fall to the ground. There it was, a little white face with its 4 tiny eyes looking up at me. I sort of stood there staring down at it, not doing it or saying anything. That was when Batinsky kicked up his heels and charged my way, ladder and all. Soup hung on like his hands were glued to that ladder. What's the trouble? Asked Soup. It's a button. A what? One of the buttons came off my pants. Forget it, said Soup. I don't dare. Mama said if I was to lose any more buttons, and if one came off, I was always to fetch it home so she could sew it back on. Then pick it up. I don't want to. Why not? Batinsky's standing on it. It was true. As that billy goat's hooves were dancing around, I saw my button down under harm's way. I didn't have the courage to get any closer. I can't get the button, I told Soup. Batinsky let out one mean-sounded snort as if to tell me I wasn't ever going to get my button back. His hooves were prancing on it, and I was so excited I forgot about how much I had to go to the bathroom. Grab your end of the ladder, said Soup. Will you get my button? Okay, I'll try. Good, I said. Rob, get his attention. I think we already got his attention. Now all we need to do is get back my button. You and your dang button. I never knew a button could make a goat so angry. Not that Batinsky was getting red in the face or anything like that, but he sure was bucking around more than a bit. Each time that billy goat kicked up his hooves, I thought for sure his horns would become untangled, and that would surely be the end of us. I didn't care about the button anymore, or about going to the bathroom. I just wanted to escape. Maybe he's hungry, Soup. Great, we'll feed him your button. With his head still caught in the ladder, Batinsky charged at me again with fire in his eyes. It was all I could do to keep my fingers around the bottom rung of the ladder. Soup bent over and was searching for the button. I can't find it, yelled Soup. It's white, I told him. Well, it's gone. Jeepers, if I come home without that button, my mother will kill me. Hang on to that ladder or your mother won't ever have the pleasure. Keep looking, I hollered at Soup. As Soup was bending over, searching wildly through the grass, Batinsky saw Soup's behind. Ladder and all, he lunged forward, head down and full speed. A second later, Soup was sort of flying forward with a real surprised expression on his face. I never knew a goat could laugh, but Batinsky sure did. Then I heard another sound, a voice, but it sure wasn't laughing. Hey, yelled Mrs. Tinker. Turning around, I saw Mrs. Tinker marching our way with a bonnet on her head and a long willow stitch in her hand. I wanted to run, but my feet were stuck inside my wet sneakers, which seemed to be nailed to the ground. What in tarnation are you boys doing? Soup said. We're looking for a button, Miss Tinker said. With a ladder? Folks around town said that Mrs. Tinker was so sour that she was weaned on a pickle, and that she never laughed. Never in my whole life did I ever see anybody chuckle louder than Miss Tinker. She laughed so hard, she cried, and then she sat down in the pasture grass and laughed some more. She was laughing, she was holding her sides, and then when Batinsky laughed again, I thought she'd near to bust a rib. Finally, she stopped and got a hold of her goat, so we took off our ladder and ran. We never found the button.